Welcome back to the Metal Exchange, here for a very special episode and something a little bit different. I got Chris here with me as usual. How are you, bud?
Very good. I woke up today with Revolution Calling stuck in my head, so still in the Queensryche state of mind.
Nice. We're going to have a little bit of a revolution here as well. We're joined by the mystery third man for this week. Michael Crea joins us. Michael Crea. A longtime friend and a perfect person, I think, to join us for today's discussion as we talk about the origins of our ProgPower experience. Going back to 2002, talking about ProgPower 3 and kind of why we went and stuff like that, and really, I guess, the reasons for how this, in part, how the podcast kind of came together. Mike, how are you?
Good. I'm glad to be a part of this, and thanks for having me.
Oh, our pleasure, man. I think it's going to be a fun conversation because as I was kind of like going back in time and, just kind of piecing these things together, I realized that my memory is terrible. And it's ironic because when I went to this show back in 2002, I was not 21 and I didn't have a single beer the entire weekend, but I don't remember a lot of it. I remember like images and different like things that happened, but as an overall weekend, I have very little memory of this, so I'm hoping if we put our three heads together, we can kind of piece this thing back together.
Most of my memories revolve around merchandise Mike purchased, including Gamma Ray box sets and Silent Force jackets, but I'm sure we'll talk about that in detail as we proceed.
For sure, and I think that that is the reason why he is definitely the perfect person to join us this week. I'm going to go back to February 26th of 2002, and I remember going on Blabbermouth, the metal site, and they had released a press release for what was ultimately the origins of ProgPower 3, and it was basically a press release where they had announced the third version of this festival that was taking place in November of 2002, and they kind of went into the lineup, and they announced that the headliners would be Blind Guardian and Angra and Gamma Ray. They also mentioned Threshold, and they had quotes from Hansi Kirsch and Kai Hansen. And I remember seeing this and thinking to myself, I have to be there. My first question for you guys is, had you ever heard about ProgPower 2, or was this like kind of the first that you had heard about the festival?
I don't think I heard of ProgPower 1 or 2, but I remember there being rumblings of the third one happening and who was going to play, and I remember like a lot of people, it was on a message board, but I don't remember which message board, but somebody was, people were speculating like who was going to play, and there was kind of this buzz that it was going to be a really, really like extra special lineup. And then I just remember when the lineup was announced, I think we all just like called each other. I think we were all in college at the time, and we're all just calling each other and being like, we're going to have to go to this thing.
Had you ever heard of the fest, Mike, or was it just kind of through us when you heard, obviously, the lineup announced?
No, I heard of, actually it was a festival called Power Mad before this whole ProgPower thing, and Power Med was, I forgot where that was held. I
think it was in Maryland.
Maryland, yeah. And then from that, this stemmed out, but I don't remember ProgPower 1 or 2 or anything like that.
So Glenn Harveston, who was a patron of Power Mad, was the one that puts on the ProgPower USA show. The first festival was held in Chicago in 2001, early 2001. Kind of a lower end lineup, a lot of American bands, and it was kind of bookended by Jag Panzer, Evergrey, Pain of Salvation, and Symphony X, which were kind of the anchors for that first show. And then he would do a second edition in Atlanta, where the festival has been held ever since, and he did that in November of 2001. And I think you can kind of see the transition into bigger lineups. What do you think, Chris?
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't the story that Glenn had attended Power Mad and was like, I could do a better festival than this, and one of his friends was just like, well, then why don't you? And he's like, okay, and then he did.
I mean, it was really as simple as that, and the Chicago show was kind of a, I wasn't there. I had never heard about it, so I don't know that the publicity was great. But for whatever reason, it sold well at a very small venue, and then he moved it kind of closer to his home in Atlanta, which is, as I said, where the second festival ultimately took place, and the rest would as well. The second festival, which I did not go to, I had friends that went. We have mutual friends that went, but we never went, is something I still kick myself about, because I'll just go through the lineup quickly. Not as many heavy hitters, but a lot of bands that I personally love, and I just am kicking myself for not going. Superior, who would break up soon thereafter, from Germany. Balance of Power, which was one of my favorite bands, who I'm still to this day not happy that I never got to see. Nightingale, Spiral Architect, Steel Prophet, Angel Dust, Arc, which is my biggest regret of them all, not seeing that band, and then Evergrey, Camelot, and Symphony X. So right away, you can see that the lineup is trending in the right direction. And then they announced this thing, and all I can say about this festival is that when you look at the lineup, and we'll go through it all, but when you look at this lineup, you have many bands, multiple bands, all of whom did headlining tours of the U.S. in the next 20 years, and some of these bands are at the middle or bottom of the lineup.
Yeah, for sure. I think that when you kind of remind me of like who the top bands were at ProgPower 1 and 2, it was more kind of on the proggier end, whereas I feel like on this lineup, it was like they went full bore with power metal, with Gamma Ray and Angra and Blind Guardian and Ed Guy, just to name probably the top 4 power metal bands that played at ProgPower 3. But yeah, that was like I want to say the first time almost all of those bands had played a show in the United States. Blind Guardian may have previously, I'm not 100% sure, but I know Gamma Ray, Ed Guy, Angra. I know that had to be Silent Force's maybe only show in the U.S. that I'm aware of. Just a lot. I think it was Threshold's first show in the U.S. I mean, just a lot of debuts, and that would lead to these bands actually coming to the U.S. and doing tours, which wasn't a thing prior to that. I mean, some of the albums you couldn't even get because they weren't released domestically. So that was another thing. I'm sure we'll talk about the all the stuff that they had on sale there, but it was just, I feel like this ProgPower 3 festival was like a gateway for a lot of power and prog metal bands to get more well known in this country, do tours, and have albums released here.
Blind Guardian had never played the U.S. At this point. In fact, it was the debut for almost all the bands except for Pain of Salvation, who had obviously played at that first edition a year and a half prior. But for everybody except Pain of Salvation, 0 Hour, and Reading Zero, these were all debuts. Devin Townsend obviously had played here as well in different capacities, but he was doing most of the stuff with Strapping Young Lad. He had never played a solo show ever. In fact, this was his first solo show anywhere. And you can see by some of that old video footage, it was really raw, and we'll get to that in a minute. But I don't remember how we all decided we have to go to this thing, but I remember seeing the press release and saying to myself, come hell or high water, I have to see these bands, because to your point, nobody was touring the U.S. at this point. Not these bands. We got very lucky to see Halloween back in 1998, but that was a one-off. And short of that, if it wasn't a Metallica or a Queensryche or a Symphony X or a Dream Theater, none of these bands were playing. And this was almost like the gateway drug, if you will, where they played this festival and then they said, you know what, there's a bit of a following here. Maybe we can do another show or a small tour. And for some of these bands, it absolutely exploded.
Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree. I don't remember how we came to all agree upon going, but I remember Chris being in college, and Justin, you and I believe we took a flight down together, right?
Yeah, we flew down together. I don't remember, Chris, if you had flown from Scranton directly or if you had come with us, but I remember flying down with you, and we had gone on vacation about 2 years prior to this. It was the first time that we all had flown out anywhere together, but it was the first time that we had gone to a metal festival, just because, we were young. There was, we weren't going to Wacken at the time, so this was about as good as it was going to get. And I remember knowing nothing about it other than we fly into the Atlanta airport. and then we just kind of have loose directions to get to the hotel and the venue down the street.
So Mike, yeah, you're right. I was in college at Scranton. I flew by myself. I will never forget the night before we were set to leave. That, of course, it's a Thursday night, so of course there's a party going on in our house. And I forgot. I think it was like my roommate Pete. It was his birthday, so like somebody just lugs in a keg of Rolling Rock into our house the night before. So like I'm 3 sheets to the wind, and I'm in my bedroom on the floor, and I mean, this was like before texting, as crazy as that is. So we were probably like IMing each other on AOL or AIM or whatever. And I forgot, somebody was like, bring your liner notes because you're going to probably meet the bands and you're going to want to get stuff signed. So I'm sitting on the floor in my bedroom drunk, picking out like which liner notes I wanted to bring with me, going through all my Gamma Ray and Ed Guy and Angra CDs or whatever and putting them in a bag or whatever. And I just remember like, I had to force myself to go to sleep at like, I don't know, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. My flight left at like 6:30, and I had a friend of mine who was supposed to drive me to the airport the next morning, and he set an alarm, and he's like, all right, just wait 1 second, and he just goes to the bathroom, throws up, and then goes, all right, I'm ready, let's go.
Oh God, to be young again.
I remember thinking to myself, like, oh my God, I hope they let me on the plane because I probably smell like the bottom of a taxi cab right now. Like it was funny because once I got there, just like you, like I didn't have a drink the entire time. Mike was 21 at the time, but me and you were 20, so like we couldn't even legally get a drink. And back then, like I was like, I never wanted to drink at concerts anyway, which has clearly changed over the years, but at the time I was just like, oh man, I just want to remember as much of this as possible. So plus I was probably so hungover from the night before that I didn't really care to have a drink anyway. I remember Mike even offered to get me a drink because he had the bracelet, but I was just like, nah, I'm good. I just want to kind of take all this in. So that was kind of my experience of getting there.
Boy, would that change over the next 20 years. I remember sending that message about the liner notes now that you mention it, because our mutual friends who had gone the year prior said that they got to meet Camelot and all these other bands. And I said to myself, may as well just get these things signed. And they're probably sitting in my attic right now. But I remember vividly getting off the plane with you, Mike, seeing the Shoe Shine guy, which obviously was a funny thing to this point. You want to get into that and tell a little bit about your memory of that guy?
I think that's my first memory of ProgPower 3. Other than that, I can't remember what happened before that, but I'll never forget getting off the plane and walking through the airport like with a stupid smile on my face just because I don't travel much, and that was maybe at that point the furthest I've ever been from my house. So I'm like, look at this place, and then I hear "Shoe Shine Shine" and "Shoe Shine Shine," like going walking through the airport, and I couldn't help but burst out laughing. And I think Pat was with us, and and he's like, "Shh," I couldn't help it. I tried to keep it in, but I heard the guy, and I lost it.
Oh, maybe I had to be there, but I'm crying right now because that was exactly how I remember it 20 years ago. And we get to the airport, we get to the mass transit system, which is called the MARTA. We jump on this thing, we get off the exit for the hotel, and we get out. We have no idea where we're going. We wind up going across the street to the actual, at the time it was called the Granada Hotel, and it will probably always be the Granada to me. We get to the hotel, kind of dump our stuff in a room, but as we go to check in and we get into the lobby, I remember seeing something which was a memory that I will take to my grave. You want to get into that?
Yeah, we walked, like, I guess, I can't remember if I met you guys at the airport, but I remember we walked in at the same time. And we walk into the lobby, and the Artmore looks very different nowadays. There was no courtyard after parties like we have nowadays. Like it just felt like a lot more intimate. But we walked in, and just sitting in the lobby is Kiko Loureiro from Angra, just with his guitar, like just practicing. And at that point, we all just kind of looked at each other and we were like, "Holy crap, where are we right now?" Like, it was like seeing your heroes come to life right in front of you, and I was like, "Oh, I guess." And I remember later on that day, meeting Henjo Richter from Gamma Ray and him being super nice and just whipping out booklets and getting guys to sign stuff on a whim, and it was wild. Like, it was mind boggling to me that these guys were just kind of like hanging out amongst the peons, you know?
The way I would describe it was Disney World for power and progressive metal fans, because that's what it really was like, where you're getting to like meet the bands and all this stuff that just had seemed so foreign to me at the time. What was interesting was that we flew in on a Friday because the show was going to be Friday and Saturday, and we had obviously tickets to fly home on Sunday. There was a pre-show on Thursday. I didn't even contemplate going to this thing. The bands that were scheduled to play and actually played the pre-show were Magistral, Persephone's Dream, and Sea Seren, all American bands, and it was actually held at a different venue. This was the night before on Thursday, but whatever. I mean, we flew in on a Friday. We wind up coming home on Sunday, and I just remember thinking to myself, the whole 2 days flew by. It just seemed like an absolute blink of an eye, and now the thing's like a week. 4 days of shows and all this stuff, and it's just so funny how things have changed over time. How it's just become a different experience for sure. But yeah, to your point, we get there on Friday and we're kind of like walking around the hotel, and I remember vividly catching wind that there was something going on in the basement of the hotel, and I didn't quite know what it was, but I remember going down to the basement of the hotel, and there was like, I guess, press interviews that were taking place in the basement of the hotel. I don't know if I had my beer courage or whatever, because I hadn't had a drink, but we just walked right into this thing and started getting booklets signed and introducing ourselves to everybody like we owned the place, which is kind of funny because we were nobodies at this point.
Yeah, we're still nobodies.
That's true. That's true. I no argument there. That hasn't changed. But the confidence to actually just go in there and get this stuff signed was amazing.
I remember seeing Dirk Schlachter and Henjo Richter from Gamma Ray kind of go out this door to go have a cigarette in the parking garage. And was it you, Mike? I grabbed somebody, and I was just like, I just followed them out there, and I'm like, yeah, I'll just light up a smoke and hang out with these guys and act like I was just coming out to have a smoke, and they ended up being so nice. Henjo didn't speak great English, but Dirk did, and they were asking questions about like what the metal scene was like in the U.S., and I was kind of telling them that I had a college radio show at the time, and they were asking like, what's that like? And I was like, well, like a couple of people from the local prison listened to it and stuff, but I think that was just such a memorable moment to just kind of like sneak off in the parking garage.
Yeah, I do remember that. You did grab me, and we went to the garage. I remember Henjo's there. I remember talking to him quite a bit, and I'll never forget sneaking into that press conference. Not really sneaking, more like just waltzing in, because the security guard was standing right there, and we just walked past him. We said hello. That was it.
That would become a theme for the next 20 years as well, but that's a story for another day. And Glenn, if you're listening, I humbly apologize, but it is what it is. We walked right in, and it was great. I remember Angra was there. I remember meeting Edu and getting him to sign a bunch of the booklets. This is right when he had joined the band. And obviously I remember Ed Guy, I think, being there as well in and around the same time, because all these bands were staying at the Granada.
I think Mike might have told the security guard that he knew a good shoe shine guy, and that's what kind of got us through the door.
That was the password, right? Like for the
I just remember thinking to myself, like, yeah, we're not supposed to be in here, but nobody really seemed to care. So
yeah, it was. I remember that vividly. And then before you know it, it was time to actually go down the block to center stage and watch the show. I think it was called Earthlink Live at this point, but based on our history, it would always be center stage to us. I'm going to actually toss this one to you, Chris. You want to get into a brief history of this venue?
Yeah, this is where the NWA/WCW would record pretty much all of their television tapings. So it was kind of like this holy grail for a wrestling fan. And I always thought it was kind of interesting that they would that ProgPower was taking place there. I think it was originally called Center Stage, changed to Earthlink Live, and then changed back. It's now Center Stage yet again. But I mean, there were jokes galore about, like, you know, Cactus Jack coming into the basement, hitting Vader with a shovel after Ed Guy finished their set. Like, just a lot of we still to this day make jokes about, like, oh, you know, the ghost of Dusty Rhodes is in the rafters during the Master Plan set. Just silly things like that. But yeah, so it was kind of like going to this, like, holy grail of a wrestling place. So that was really cool. Just and it brings, going back and watching those old wrestling matches and seeing them at Center Stage. It just is, it's so hard to believe that there was, like, wrestling there, because it just doesn't look like a place you would see wrestling. But I guess the ring was on the floor where all the fans would be standing during the concert. So it just makes me laugh especially when they go backstage, because years later we would actually become sponsors and actually see backstage and just be like, holy crap, this is where, like, you know, Sting and Ric Flair, like, were fighting each other or whatever. So yeah, that was kind of a cool thing. A little, if you're a wrestling fan, that was a cool little connection there.
And the venue gets a lot of flack, I guess, for being kind of a, you know, not the greatest venue or whatever for wrestling, and I guess I can appreciate that. But for music, sonically, it's one of the best sounding venues that I've ever been in. So that I'll say right off the bat. It's kind of an interesting setup. As you said, there's a floor area, and then there's stadium seating in a half circle that kind of surrounds the stage. And then the other side of the venue is just the stage, where everyone is obviously watching it, again, in a half round setting, watching the shows. And it's kind of perfect in the sense that it's a big enough venue that you don't feel like there's 25 people there, but it's intimate enough that there's no bad seat, and the sound, as I said, is really, really good.
I agree completely. As long as it's not like that one time we saw Symphony X, and it was so loud that I had to step outside, even though I was in the last row in the venue. But
yeah, that's a story for another podcast. Do you remember if we went right in to watch the band? And we'll get into the bands in a second. But do you remember if we did that, or if we went to, like, what they would call, like, the vendors, which were kind of littered outside the lobby?
Well, the way it was set up at the time was that you walk in, and, you know, nowadays there's that the vendor room, which is kind of like a bar that was converted into a space for all these vendors to set up their tables and sell stuff. But at the time, they were just outside the venue, where, like, the bar, like the venue's bars and everything are, like, right outside the doors into where the concert was taking place. So it was crowded. I mean, you had these tables of people selling CDs, like, right outside the door as you walk out from the show. God, I remember spending every last dollar I had at the time, which wasn't much. It was like maybe $120, and I spent all of it on CDs that I hadn't gotten, because, you know, when you're in college, you're just broke all the time. So
and the access, like, you don't have access to half these albums, at least in 2002.
I remember, like, most of the bands that played, I hadn't gotten their latest album. So, like, I needed to get Gamma Ray's New World Order or No World Order album, and I had to get Ed Guy's Mandrake album, which I ended up getting signed while I was there, and Angra's Nova Era Rebirth album. I think I got Blind Guardian's Night at the Opera album as well, if that was out at the time. I don't remember, but I bought a ton of stuff. I remember buying the Dionysus album, Sight Unseen, just because the guy was, like, hawking it, and he was like, oh, it was produced by Tobias Sammet, and it's got the singer from Luca Turilli, and I'm like, all right, what the hell? And I remember buying Misa Mercuria, that kind of project that I think it was, like, the guys from Vandenplas and
DC Cooper.
DC Cooper, which that was really cool. Just kind of like, it was kind of cool just buying things on a whim and then not being able to actually listen to them until we got home and pop them into a CD player. But Mike was, like, the king of merch at that festival. Like, I remember, like, thinking to myself, like, are they going to let this guy back on the plane? Like, he's the
customs for him to get this back into New York.
He's got a 2 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot cube with every Gamma Ray album ever released, with one missing signature. Mike, why don't you tell us the story of the missing signature?
Yeah, I remember I had about 20 albums at least with me on the way back. I was like, I have to load up. look at all this stuff, and it's all cheaper than around here and everything else. But I found the Gamma Ray box set back then, and I was like, I don't have any of their albums, and let me just grab this. It looks awesome. If I can get it signed, even better. And so I got all their signatures except for the drummer,
Dan Zimmerman.
Yes, Dan Zimmerman. And I remember asking the lead singer of Gamma Ray, I was like, "Where's Dan?" And he's like, "Oh, I don't know. He's off somewhere." I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, I got you."
What's funny is, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't you follow Kai Hansen into an elevator at some point?
Yes.
Like you ran after him? I mean, like literally running down the hallway.
Where's Dan Zimmerman? He's grabbing him by the lapels. Tell me where Dan Zimmerman is.
No, I didn't run after him. We just happened to share the same elevator, and I think this was before I even started buying any of the merchandise and everything. And I'm standing there, and I'm like, "Holy cow! I'm in an elevator with Kai Hansen. Like, what's going on?" And he starts. We start BSing about the elevator sign and the capacity, and they're like, he starts, saying this and that about the elevator sign and, who needs a permit and this and that. So, I don't know. We're just joking about. And then we got out of the elevator.
That's not how you told me the story. Why don't you tell it the way you told me with the accent?
Well, there's a little more cursing involved, and I don't want to say that. So, so I'm giving you the light version.
We're getting the abridged version.
Yeah, he's like, who wants to go to the office to get the elevator permit, and blippity blank blank blank, and so yeah, we get off the elevator, we said our goodbyes, and I was like, yeah, I'll see you later, good luck and this and that. And
if you subscribe to our Patreon, you can hear the uncensored version of Mike telling the story.
Did you ever find Dan Zimmerman?
No, I never did. It
was like a running joke for the whole second day we were there, like Mike's quest to find Dan Zimmerman. Because I remember, man, I don't know what, maybe it's Da Vinci's now, but there was this Greek restaurant that's like made gyros and stuff, and I remember we went there to eat, and we were coming outside, and all four members of Gamma Ray were all standing there, so we all took pictures with them. But that, I think, was before Mike had bought his box set.
Yeah.
And that was the only time I had seen Dan Zimmerman the entire time we were there, and we were lucky enough to get a picture with the entire band. But
yeah, I took that picture.
Well, I appreciate it.
I'll tell you a funny story, which I think Chris especially will appreciate. I remember buying In Search of Truth from Evergrey when I was there on a recommendation, never knowing that Tom Englund would actually be at ProgPower 3 as a patron. That would become a running theme for the next 20 years of Tom Englund not necessarily playing the festival, but being there. I just thought it was ironic that it started really early and it never ended, because, I mean, like I said, I think they were at the first one and they just
that was the year his lease started, when living in the basement at Center Stage.
Exactly.
Him and Michael Erickson from Circus Maximus share a 1-bedroom apartment underneath Center Stage with the ghosts of Big Van Vader.
Exactly. Getting into the lineup for a little bit, I remember this was the time in my life where if there was a band playing, I was going to stay and watch the band, even though I knew nothing by some of these, at least one of these artists. I remember the show kicked off with 0 Hour, and it would be like, if the band was playing, I wasn't going to go outside. I was just going to watch the whole set. And I remember 0 Hour playing and just thinking they were technically masters, but for some reason, I think I was so excited to see Silent Force and the rest of the bands that were coming up that I have little memory of the actual set itself.
I can't remember if I saw 0 Hour. I mean, I can't imagine I was alone. If you guys were there, then I was probably with you, but I really have no memory of seeing them. How about you, Mike?
Yeah, I remember seeing them, and I even to this day, I'm a little more picky than you guys, so I'm not the biggest fan, but I've seen them more times than I'd like to ever.
Well, everyone's got a right to their opinion. I do know for a fact that everyone was there for the next band, because again, you're talking about the second band of the night, and it's DC Cooper fronting Silent Force, who, if I'm not mistaken, this was, I think, off the heels of their second full-length release, and they were kind of really kicking it into high steam at this point, just in terms of the albums that they were putting out, because that second Silent Force album was awesome.
Yeah, I remember buying it at that ProgPower and having it signed by DC, and maybe somebody else was there. Somebody else, I think I got their autograph too from Silent Force. I'm not remembering off the top of my head, but I was so pumped that they played River of Pain, because I was like, oh, it'd be so cool if they busted out a Royal Hunt song, and I was such a huge DC fan, and I talked about it when we did our Royal Hunt live album review a couple of weeks ago, I got to meet him, which was a super cool experience, and probably one of the tallest guys I had met out of all the band members. But I thought that they were fantastic. I mean, it was like a really high energy, fast paced. They played a couple of songs from DC's solo album, which I'm a big fan of. They finished with a Judas Priest cover of "You've Got Another Thing Coming." They played "Fall Into Oblivion," which is a song I had never heard before and instantly fell in love with from that performance, and I couldn't wait to go home and listen to it on the CD I just bought. So, Mike, do you have any interesting stories revolving around Silent Force from while we were there?
I have a very...
I want to interject for a second. Hold on. I've already spoiled this for some of the listeners, and I've told the Silent Force story, but I have a feeling I butchered some of it, so I want to hear it straight from the horse's mouth. Mike, tell us about your experience with Silent Force.
Well, it was... forgive me for not knowing their names, because at the time, I was still trying to listen to all these bands that some of them I never even heard of and trying to get into them, but I was walking along the merchandise area in the hallway, and I see the guitarist and the bassist, and they're standing in front of their merch table, and they stop me, and they say, "Do you want to buy some stuff? You know, how would you like to buy my jacket?" I was
so he offered it up to you straight up. There was this was the introduction. Buy the jacket off of my back.
Yes, this is the bassist saying, like, "Do you want to buy my jacket?" And I'm like, this is crazy. Like, I mean, I just heard these guys, and I liked them, and they were great. So I was like, I'll tell you what, I'll buy your jacket if I can get a picture with you guys. So I got a picture with both of them, and they gave me a discount on the jacket because it's used, and I still have it right here next to me, and it's a great jacket, and I will always treasure it. And that's what happened.
So at the time, it would have been Alex Bayrod on guitar and Jürgen Steinmetz on bass. So that's that. And I think it was Alex who also had signed my CD that I couldn't come up with his name. And he's like all over the place now. He's in Primal Fear, and I forgot what else he plays with. Matt Sinner. So that became a running joke that by the end of the festival, Mike would have an entire outfit comprised of guys from different bands. We're like, he's going to get Kai Hansen's boxer shorts, and he's going to get a shirt from Tobias Sammet, and so that became kind of a funny running joke that is still going on to this day. But I love that you still have that jacket. That's so cool.
Oh yeah, how could I not?
It's that I still laugh whenever I hear that story. Silent Force gets off the stage, and then a half an hour later, I think our lives would be forever changed when Ed Guy takes the stage.
This was the one. How things have changed. This was the only set I stood on the floor for. I sat for it, pretty much everything else. I'm sure I stood at my seat for certain moments, but this was one of those things where I was like, oh my god, I need to get as close to the stage as humanly possible. And it's kind of funny because this is in the time of disposable cameras, and I'm taking pictures of all these bands, and this is the only band pictures that came out because everything I took from the seats, I was too far away and didn't have a decent enough. I wasn't close enough. So, but yeah, this was insane. This was so incredible.
It's funny. I was to this day, Mandrake is not my favorite Ed Guy album, and even though they played they played quite a few songs off of it, I was still in the height of my Ed Guy fandom here. And then not only do they kind of touch, a little bit of all the albums that come before it for the most part, when they played the cover of Avantasia, I think I lost my mind because, as I had mentioned in the Metal Opera episode, it's one of my favorite albums of all time. I never thought I would have a chance to see something like that live, and that hour felt like it went by in about 15 minutes. Would you agree with that, Mike?
Oh yeah. Ed Guy really stole the show to me. Like they were just so moved, I think, by the audience's reaction. I don't think they expected that from an American audience, and that was their first time in the U.S., I believe.
Yeah. And what's interesting to me is I'm not going to say that Tobias is the best singer of the bunch. There were a lot of great singers on that stage, but I think that everyone would agree he was the best frontman on that stage, and the way that he could command that crowd. I don't think there was anybody in the entire place that was sitting down and not rocking out to that set, because I just remember they are definitely one of the bands that stole the show, and they would come back and they would wind up headlining ProgPower 5, and this really just launched them into the stratosphere. And then, not terribly long after, they would be headlining back and playing in front of 80,000 people on a regular basis. So, I mean, this literally just launched them into the next level.
I remember, he wouldn't stop until every single person in the venue was on their feet. He's like, "Well, I see somebody in the last row is not standing." And I think the crowd's energy and his energy were just feeding off of each other, and just it was like this domino effect of just energy and the songs they played. I had just purchased Mandrake probably that day, so I was not really. I think the only song I really knew was "Tears of a Mandrake" because the single was released, but I wasn't familiar with the album. So when they played "Save Us Now" and they were singing about high-speed alien drum bunnies, I'm like, I'm sold. I got to go home and listen to this album. This was just mind-boggling, and to this day, I still say who's going to be the Ed Guy of this year? Who's going to be that middle of the lineup band that just steals the show? And bands like Murath and I forgot who else comes to mind off the top of my head, but that was one of them. Just that just came in and blew the roof off the place. That wasn't a headliner or anything. So, and 2 years later they were back headlining the festival. So I think that they made an impression on pretty much everybody that was there. And I just had a blast, jumping up and down and screaming. But, I think the thing most people remember is, just Tobias being completely it's an American crowd, they'll cheer anything, I could say anything. So he just decided to go on this expletive filled thing where he just said every swear word that he could think of. We'll have to post it if I could find it. I think it's on YouTube somewhere, but he got, he'd say some swear words and the crowd would respond, and he's like, this is great. It's hilarious. Something I will never ever forget being a part of. Just and him, just the smile on his face. It was just incredible. And we got to meet. It was so funny. I remember meeting him and Jens Ludwig, who ended up being on our podcast a couple of months ago. But meeting them in the lobby, there was a computer room for people to go check their email because nobody had, there was no smartphones or anything like that. They had to go to this computer room to go check their email, and we ran into them and we're just constantly asking for photos, and I asked Jens and Tobias to take a picture with me, and so I'm in the middle and I got these two guys on either side of me, and Tobias is not the tallest guy in the world. He's probably maybe 5'7" or whatever, and he just looks up at me and he goes, "I feel like I'm standing in an effing hole next to this guy." I never forget him saying that. And I sent those pictures to Jens after we talked to him, and he's like, "Oh my God, we're kids back then." And I was like,
"We all were." I mean, it was the time. after that, I actually felt a little sorry for the next band to come on because the headliners that night actually went on fourth instead of last just because of some scheduling issues. Blind Guardian takes the stage next, and they are, to this day, one of the tightest live bands I've ever seen. It was a really good set, and what really stuck out to me was the set list that they played. It was just phenomenal. A ton of stuff from Nightfall on Middle Earth, a ton of stuff from Imaginations. I mean, it was just your typical greatest hits set list from these guys. But they had a tough act to follow. And correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, but I don't even think you saw that set.
Oh, heard the whole thing. I was standing right outside the door, just BSing with a friend about. We just got talking about Savatage and wrestling for like an hour, and I was just standing at the door. I heard the whole set, but I don't think I even set foot like inside the room itself. But I heard it all, and the crowd was going crazy. And I mean, when they would come back to ProgPower years later, they headlined the Thursday night show. It was one of the best sets I'd ever seen at ProgPower, and I've seen quite a few, so I'm sure this was just as good. But yeah, I was a little bit worn after that Ed Guy performance. Like that took a lot of energy out of me just because I had such a good time. And you're right, it was a pretty hard act to follow.
Did you catch that set, Mike, or was this kind of like were you kind of a little fatigued at this point?
I can't say I remember seeing them. I'm not sure. I'm not. I know I'm going to get crucified for this, but I'm not like the biggest Blind Guardian fan. So probably back then, I most likely skipped it.
We're going to be disconnecting Mike's microphone in 3, 2. No, just kidding.
I was hanging out probably in the hallway most likely.
Yeah. The next set,
looking for Dan Zimmerman.
Yeah, probably.
Still looking for him. The next set was kind of interesting because it was a band that I loved, but I think that a lot of other people, very polarizing, and that's Pain of Salvation. They're actually scheduled to play next year, which I'm looking forward to as well. They're going to be playing all the Perfect Element. This to me was the height of their success as a band. They had just come off of Remedy Lane. They had just released Remedy Lane, which is my favorite album of theirs. The Perfect Element was obviously fresh in the memories of Pain of Salvation fans. I remember loving this particular set just because it was all this old material, which I loved. The band itself kind of took some turns after this, which I'm not as into in terms of some of the newer material, but this set for me was awesome, although I'm not sure that you guys are as into the band as I was.
I think I skipped that one.
Yeah,
it was a long and hard decision, but I had to bow out on that. I mean, I just didn't care. I don't even think I knew any of their songs at the time. So I took a walk. I was done at that point, and there was a lot that we had to rest for because the next day there was just a lot more good stuff going on. But I definitely remember going back to the hotel afterwards and hanging out in the lobby with some of the guys. I can't remember which night was which, but the guys from Ed Guy were super fun. And yeah, I guess Justin, I don't think Mike saw Pain of Salvation either, so I guess you're going to have to lead the way on this one if there's any anecdotes.
Yeah, nothing extraordinary other than, again, the set list that they chose was just great because they had 4 albums at this point, all of which were kind of home run albums for me. Not as crazy about some of the newer stuff, but at the time, these guys could do no wrong. It was their classic lineup with all the guys that had been together for a while at this point. I just remember enjoying the set, but I also had that fatigue factor, and I think that they would have fit nicely after Ed Guy as a little bit of a come down and then have Blind Guardian go on last. But again, scheduling concerns got in the way. I remember nothing at all. I mean, literally nothing about what happened after this set. I just remember waking up the next day and finding my way back to see Reading Zero, who I had never heard a note from. These guys were the openers for the second day of the fest, the Saturday, night. I have nothing to say other than I just remember watching the set and they were good. Just unremarkable because of, again, what was about to come.
Yeah, I remember the ProgPower website had like one or two songs from each band that you could download and listen to. So I think I had made a like my own little sampler disc. So I probably heard like one song from Reading Zero and one song from Zero Hour, and it didn't really excite me. So again, this is another one where I'm sure I probably sat there and listened to it, but I have no memory of it.
Right after this would come one of my favorite sets, maybe of all time. I don't know that it's funny because even though it's one of my favorite sets of all time, I can't even say that it was my favorite set of the weekend. But getting to watch Threshold, and we were all big Threshold fans. I still am. They are one of the tightest live bands I've ever seen, and I've had the pleasure of seeing them with all of their different lead singers at this point. But this was the one time we got to see Max sing in the United States, and they were coming off of Hypothetical, which was arguably their best album, although I think it's a very hard choice. What a performance. And I know that, Mike, you absolutely love this set. I just remember you going crazy when they went back and played the Latent Gene.
Yes, I found out about Threshold blindly by I saw one of their CDs and I was like, this is cool cover art. I think this is probably going to sound good. So I bought it. This was way before ProgPower. And I'm like, wow, okay, yeah, this is great. So I was really looking forward to seeing them. And when he announced that they're going to play the Latent Gene, I screamed at the top of my lungs, which you can hear on their DVD. You can hear me scream, yeah!
Because you were the only one going nuts for that song, which is a great song, but you were literally the only one in the entire place going crazy for it.
It was exactly after he says the song name. You hear, yeah, in the background, and that's me. And so I'm on the DVD.
Yeah, it was, and just the whole performance. I mean, the set list was a very good set list. I thought Mac live was just outstanding.
Yeah, I remember meeting them after.
So this set was filmed for DVD? I don't think I realized that.
One or two songs, I believe, were.
I think it wound up on the ProgPower DVD. I don't think that Threshold released it.
Oh.
Yeah, but I mean, it was just. I remember them playing Paradox from Wounded Land to close the set, which I was not expecting.
God, that reminds me of. I just thought it was so funny because Mac wasn't in the band when Wounded Land came out, so when they get to this last song and he goes, "Oh, we're gonna play an older song. It's called Paradox," and he's like, "It's from an older album," and he couldn't remember the name of the older album, so he asked somebody, I forgot who it was, like, what's the name of the album? And he told him, and he must not have heard him because he goes, it's from our Wonderland album. And I just remember probably Pat not letting them hear the end of it after saying it, the wrong album title. But it was awesome getting to hear a song from that first album, and that's my favorite song from that album.
As Mike has brought to my attention, I think they actually released some clips from this show on one of their DVDs as kind of like bonus material on the Critical Energy DVD. So it was definitely it was nice to hear this stuff, and I do remember Mike going absolutely bananas for it. One of ProgPower's kind of favorite returning acts was Devin Townsend, but this, as I said, was his first full-length solo show that he would play at this fest. Had you ever heard of this guy before, or was this like completely brand new to you?
No, I didn't know who this was. All I know is that he walked in front of the microphone, said, "I just farted," and then I walked out and left. And like that was pretty much my Devin Townsend live experience until many years later when he would come back to headline the fest, and I ended up becoming actually a pretty big fan of his stuff. But like at the time, it was a little bit too out there for me, and I was just kind of into my meat and potatoes kind of stuff. And he was just this lunatic. He just walked out. He had a skullet as his haircut, and the first thing he said is, "I just farted," and I just remember me and Mike looked at each other and we just laughed.
And normally that would be the point where you go and get a drink, but again, I guess not happening at this show. It's funny. I was not a huge Devin fan at this point. I did have Accelerated Evolution, and I did have Terria, which I really, really enjoyed. They didn't play very much from those albums. They played Storm. They played Earth Day, which is a phenomenal song off of Terria, but I wasn't familiar with kind of the Ocean Machine stuff or any of that older solo material. So for me, it was kind of a hard one to swallow. I wish I could go back and watch it now, though, because I actually have a real appreciation for those albums. But it's been some time. I will say though that after Devin leaves the stage, the next two bands are really what kind of solidified this whole experience for me. Getting to see Gamma Ray and Angra back to back was like a dream come true. Does it get better than that? I don't think so.
Oh my god, I marked out pretty hard for this Gamma Ray set. They had just been doing their Skeletons in the Closet tour in Europe, where they were playing kind of like this fan voted set list of songs that they didn't play live a lot in the past. So they kind of mixed in some of that with some of their all-time classics. I mean, they opened up with Rebellion in Dreamland. They played Land of the Free. It was unreal. Gardens of the Sinner, like that was really cool getting to hear that song. I mean, this was just a insane set, and then for them to come back out for the encore and play two Halloween songs, Ride the Sky and I Want Out, and then get the curtain shut on them while they were finishing. They were supposed to play one more song after I Want Out, and we saw the set list next to the soundboard. They were going to play Send Me a Sign, and I just remember like they went overtime, and that was my first experience with the patented Glenn Harveston curtain call.
The first of many. This I think, in retrospect, probably was my favorite set of the weekend, because I was just such a big Gamma Ray fan at the time.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, Beyond the Black Hole. I mean, just never thought I'd be hearing this stuff, and it makes me kind of long for the days of this old Gamma Ray material. I know you enjoyed that as well, Mike, right? You just you were a big Gamma Ray fan at the time. You didn't have the albums, but you knew enough from us that you bought the box set and would.
He was holding the box set up at the band, like he looked like Link after he finds a treasure in The Legend of Zelda.
I had it with me. I think that was probably the same night that I bought it, so I had it with me, and. I freaked out, seeing Gamma Ray and then Angra. I mean, I always wanted to see Angra. Edu, I wanted to say this earlier, Edu was one of the nicest guys I could ever meet in a band. They were all nice.
You're a huge fan of Alma and all that other stuff. I mean, yes. you really followed them all the way through.
Yeah, I think they're awesome. I love their sound. Absolutely.
Yeah, and that Angra set was those first two Angra albums after Edu joined the band, both Temple of Shadows and Rebirth. What albums they were. And they were just, this was on the Rebirth tour. They touched a little bit of all those other albums as well. I just thought it was a perfect way to end the set. And then to end the entire festival with a cover of Number of the Beast, I thought it was like the most fitting way to end a metal festival.
Yeah, that was really cool. I wasn't really expecting that at all, and I didn't know that Angra did that, so it was cool seeing like all the people in the crowd go crazy, like, oh god, we're getting an Iron Maiden song to cap things off. It was cool, like hearing them play a couple. I wasn't really expecting them to play a lot of the stuff from when Matos was in the band, but they did end up playing Angels Cry and Nothing to Say and Carry On. So
and Metal Icarus, which I thought was a song I would never hear.
Yeah, that's true too. They played Epicus Metallicus Icarus.
When they covered Candlemass at the end of the set.
I remember coming out of our hotel room and Edu just popping out of another room. The door opens and there's like this smoke just comes out of it. It looked like pyrotechnics, but it was probably just weed. But he just comes out and he's got this I was going to say expletive deleted
a grin on his face. Yeah.
Oh my god! And like he loved Mike. He just loved Mike. Every time he saw Mike, he would just smile and point at him or wave. But Mike, just echoing what Mike said before, he was such a nice guy. He was having such a fun time, and his energy was infectious, I thought.
We get back to the hotel, obviously hang out for a bit, and then it's time to go home the next day. And I think it begs the question, shortly thereafter, Nightwish would get announced for the following year's set. I went to that next year. I know you guys didn't. Mike and obviously Chris, you'd go back a couple of years later and haven't missed one since. Mike, you've hit a lot of them since then. Why didn't you go back to the fourth one? Was it the lineup? Was it just not getting to see Stratovarius, hoping that they would get announced? What was it that kind of just prevented you from going? And I have a feeling that it has to do with money. But I'm gonna throw it out there to you guys.
Yeah, it was a combination of money and interest, and neither one of them lining up as they should. Because I was still a college student. I had to basically beg my parents to spot me for ProgPower 3 to you don't have to get me a Christmas gift or a birthday gift, because I needed tickets to the show, I needed money for the hotel room, and I needed money for the flight. And I usually, whatever money I saved during the summer from working was usually gone by this was November, which ProgPower typically would take place in September years later, but at the time this was in November, and so I had probably already blown through all my summer savings. So to me, I think as much as I would have wanted to go to ProgPower 4, the lineup didn't grab me quite like this one did. So I don't know that I wanted to go through the trouble of begging again for for the funds to go. But in retrospect, I do regret missing 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, which were the ones that I didn't go to, and then I would eventually come back to ProgPower 10 in 2009, and I haven't missed one since. And I promised, I made a promise that time at ProgPower 10 to you, Justin. I said I will never miss another ProgPower. This was just too much fun, and then all those years later, the difference between being a college student and being like a full blown adult who has a job, like
Debatable.
an actual 9-to-5 job, I could it wasn't a super expensive trip, and if you didn't, constantly eat out and have expensive meals and buy a ton of drinks at the bar, it was a pretty reasonable trip, and that was part of also my decision to keep returning. But yeah, that's I go back and I look at some of those bands that played, and the fact that I never got to see Nightwish with Tarja, and I would have loved to have seen the first time Stradivarius played at the festival, and the Conception reunion, which we were supposed to see last year, and which I still haven't gotten to see. So I've never seen Roy Khan sing live. There were so many things that I missed. John Oliva's Payne's set. I never Amorphous at ProgPower, Wuthering Heights. So many things that first Brainstorm set, that first Circus Maximus set. There's so many just iconic sets that took place in just those 5 or 6 ProgPowers that I didn't go to, that I have so many regrets about. But I've actually gotten to the point now that I've been to more festivals than I've missed, so I kind of that I can at least make myself feel better knowing that I've seen more than I've missed. So how about you, Mike?
Yeah, I think you said it all. I didn't go back to the 4th one. I'm sure it was because of money, mostly because I don't know what I was doing at the time. I was probably going back to school and working only part-time at the same time. So to this day, I've still never seen Nightwish at all. And so that's a bit of a regret, I guess. And I went back to a couple others after that. I think it was the 5th one that I went to. I can't even keep track anymore. But that was just that was without any of you guys. It was with Pat, and I remember I ended up getting I don't know if it was the flu or I got a fever anyway, and I was falling asleep halfway in the chair and this and that. It wasn't a good time, but
it was probably the ProgPower crud, as they call it. It's that everybody crammed into that building. Eventually, one person gets sick, and then everybody else kind of falls victim too. So
I'll tell you, it's just looking back, what I wouldn't give to hear and watch some of these old sets in their entirety, just because it seems like so many years ago now for some of this stuff. But it was definitely a good time, and we hope everyone enjoyed this little trip down memory lane for us, and kind of just
or Remedy Lane, if you
as
will.
the case may be. I know exactly. It was a good time had by all, and it was obviously very inspirational for us. But I have to ask you, Chris, as we come back to our regularly scheduled format for next week, it is your turn to choose an album, and I am very, very curious as to what you're going to choose.
Well, we talked a little bit beforehand, and Mike, just thanks again for joining us. It wouldn't be a discussion about ProgPower 3 without without some of your great stories about Dan Zimmerman and Silent Force jackets and all that. And we probably forgot, I mean, some of the funny things that happened. It was such a whirlwind 48 hours. To think that, like, when we go now for 4 days, it feels like it went too fast. Like, I can't even imagine just getting in Friday morning and leaving Sunday morning. And funny, I don't know if you guys remember this, but the three of us shared a room, and on Sunday morning we set an alarm because my flight was earlier than yours, and so we set an alarm and we called the front desk for a wake-up call. The wake-up call never came. The alarm never went off. I missed my flight back. So I ended up having to take a later flight. I had to stay. I think I had a layover in Philly, and I had to like sit in Philly for like an hour and a half waiting for my flight back to Scranton. And thankfully, the person who was supposed to pick me up, my friend who vomited earlier on in the story, he wasn't answering his phone earlier in the day, and he partied again the night before he was supposed to come get me, and thankfully he slept in all day, and if I had actually gotten back on time, he would have not been able to come get me, and I would have been sitting at the airport in Scranton anyway.
Truth be told, he was hanging out with Dan Zimmerman, which was the most ironic part of the whole thing. No,
he just bought a Gamma Ray pair of those pull off workout pants, but yeah, so like I think I ended up getting back around like 6:30, 7 o'clock that night, and then had to go to class the next day, and I was riding this high of like seeing one of the coolest things I'd ever seen in my life, and then also the depression of it being over in like a flash, because we spent a year talking about going and being excited about it, and so it was such an amazing experience, and it's cool that we can get back together and talk about it. And when ProgPower 5 took place, Glenn put together this DVD, which was kind of like this behind-the-scenes look at the festival, and he had put some of the pro-shot videos of previous festivals on that DVD. So there's a couple of clips from this one, from Threshold and Silent Force, and so we're going to scour YouTube and see what we can find that's been uploaded and share. But there was back then a strict no video policy, and back then nobody had phones that recorded video anyway, but I mean, you couldn't some people would have a small video camera or whatever, so like for years there was no video allowed at ProgPower, so there's very little actual footage of this. I'm sure Glenn has it all, like his own private collection, which is probably incredible, but we'll see what we can find. I was able to dig up, I think I saw at least a Threshold and a Pain of Salvation, or I'm sorry, a Devin Townsend clip that was on YouTube. So
there's some other stuff as well. We'll definitely get it out there. I know there's a Silent Force video out there and some Ed Guy stuff.
Yeah,
as well,
and I think we could try to find that Ed Guy swear fest. So that I just wanted to kind of wrap up the ProgPower discussion with that, and I'm just really looking forward to the next time we can actually attend, because this is the longest drought I've been on since I stopped going. So and not through any fault of our own, but just the world we're living in right now. So hopefully come June next year, we'll be back in Atlanta, and that's the hope. But yeah, as far as next week goes, a band that I really have ProgPower to thank for being aware of is the Australian band Voyager, whose genre is the epic electro progressive pop power metal. I don't think I know any other bands that are that genre,
and that's why they're the best. I mean, no question about it.
Best. They are. By the time this airs, they will have released their Voyage Through Time. It's a kind of like a concert spanning their entire discography and kind of a celebration of their history. It's dropping tomorrow, but by the time you hear this, it'll have been out, and I'm really looking forward to checking it out. So I thought it would be a good time to discuss them in long form for the first time, and I'm going to pick the album that really got me into the band in the first place, and that's the 2007 album Universe. I was not super familiar with Voyager until I saw them play at ProgPower, and they made a fan out of me in all of about 5 to 10 minutes of their set. So I really look forward to talking about a band that I really, really like, and also like personally, just the nicest bunch of people that I've ever met. That, like, of all these people and bands I've met, they are just super cool and really nice. And so, I'm excited to talk about them.
Nice. I think that's a great choice. Kind of hard to pick one, so I'm glad you started there. I just as good as any. So I'm looking forward to that. It's an album I enjoy. Mike, I want to thank you again for joining us. I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to jump on with us. Maybe we'll do it again soon. We'll come up with another special episode as we get closer to 75 and 100. But thanks everyone for listening. We'll be back with our regularly scheduled format next week when we talk about some Voyager. And hope everyone enjoyed this special episode. It was a trip down Remedy Lane for us. We'll talk to you soon.
Shoe shine.
Thanks for having me.
Because